Welcome to School Psych Podcast. My name is Rachel. I'm a school psychologist in Maryland, and I'm so happy to be back after the long summer break. I hope that everybody had a refreshing, relaxing time. I did a lot with my family and traveled and whatnot, but the one thing that I think is sticking with my children is we got guinea pigs. And so of all the cool places we went over the summer and all the fun things, they're all just talking about the guinea pigs. It's all the guinea pigs. And it's making me think back to my rat training days. And so I'm thinking about how I can modify their behavior and make them do different things. But anyways, that's how I spent my summer, traveling and acquiring guinea pigs. But as you can see, also, Rebecca isn't here with us tonight. She got a little bit tied up, but we're hoping that she'll join us a little bit later, maybe. But I'm going to pass it over to Eric to, introduce our guest tonight. And this is the kind of the conclusion of our book study. So real excited to have the authors here and here's some good stuff. So Eric.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Rachel. And I'll try to do what Rebecca does well, which is tell people how they can chime in. She's a little more social media savvy than I am, but you can, if you are following this podcast on YouTube, you can join the conversation live by just logging into the chat box on the YouTube link. And if you're following us on Facebook or Twitter, X, or Instagram, any of those other platforms, you can just send a message and we get the message. And but feel free to ask questions because we are live, and or continue the conversation afterwards. And as Rachel said, so the guinea pigs are intriguing, Rachel. If next podcast, if your room is divided up like a little maze and your kids have clipboards and are collecting data, we'll understand. But I think that's fascinating. And we love pets, so that's wonderful. But my name is Eric, and I am a school psychologist in Connecticut. And we're just kicking off our school year in my neck of the country. And we're excited to have Drs. Kelsey Reed and Byron McClure with us. And if you were following us in the spring, we were talking about their book, Hacking Deficit Thinking. And we'd gotten pretty much through the first 6 chapters or so and talking about strength-based approach, talking about shifting from what's wrong to what's strong. And now we're sort of focusing on a little conclusion and trying to focus on, shifting our mindsets, but then also thriving and flourishing, and how we can help not only children flourish, but educators as well toward the end of the book. So we're excited to have Drs. McClure and Reed with us. And if you don't know who they are, they're both nationally certified school psychologists and both are highly involved in now social emotional learning and strength-based approaches. And they can both tell us more about the strength-based collaborative and lessons for SEL and the things that they're doing. But we want to welcome you both and thank you for being here. And maybe we could just start right off by having you both tell us what you're doing lately, how things are going, and some of the new endeavors. I think school psychologists would love to hear about that.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to be back. I feel that I am a friend of the show. Eric, Rachel, Rebecca. It'd be great if you could join us. But this is number 3, number 4. Who's keeping count anymore? Yeah. But every time I feel honored. It's a privilege to be on this stage with you all. So I will always express my gratitude whenever I am invited back.
You are always welcome back. You have an open invitation, both of
yes.
you. We love you.
I love it. I love it. The feeling is mutual for sure. But yeah, I think since the last time I've been on, just been busy in the work. I have been very fortunate, of course, with the release of the book, to be able to speak on shifting from what's wrong to what's strong. I've been doing a lot of speaking engagements. I've been able to travel. There might be some listeners that we might have been able to cross paths. I've been able to go to, don't know why I was going to start with Florida, but yes, I've been to Florida, been to All love to, the school psychologists doing great work out there, in a place that really needs it. I've been able to go to Atlanta, to Colorado, to Utah. Got to break bread with some amazing school psychologists out in Utah. And ironically enough, I don't know if people know, but I did my doctorate work at IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where I study under the great Dr. Kovaleski, who is the guy in RTI, all things yes, response to intervention, under Dr. Runge, who is PBIS, culture, climate, positive psychology, Dr. McGowan. And there were between 6 or 8 graduates of IUP in Utah, of all places. So we got to take a picture. But it's been great just being able to travel, connect with school psychologists and educators, and just talk about strength-based practices and what that means, what it looks like in action. Of course, still doing work with 7 Mindsets. We are in a very politicized time with social emotional learning and equity and social justice. And what I've also come to realize is the work is still important and people still care deeply about the work. And so I have been spending time finding the most effective way to still get the work done because people want it. Our young people need it. And I think now more than ever is the time to keep the work going. And then just, figuring out how to be innovative and staying, relevant. I've been really attuned to AI and chat GPT and large language models and mid journey and generative and all things AI. But that's a little bit of what I've been up to here lately. So Kelsey, I'll throw it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. So I guess, similar to Byron, kind of riding the wave of hacking deficit thinking has been just really cool to see the response from everybody. So anyone who has purchased the book, read the book, like we are just so excited that so many people are really trying to kind of bring this work into their school buildings. So that's been the coolest thing for me to see, especially as a 4th-year school psychologist. I can now say that, which sounds crazy, but I'm still so new, so early in my career. So it's just been a blessing to experience this. So on top of that, a couple of speaking engagements coming up as well with the state association conferences coming up this fall. On top of, you mentioned the strength-based collective. We have a lot of awesome things happening over there. Just really focusing on practical and tangible tools that can kind of immediately be used in the school setting. So if you haven't seen yet, we released the youth strength surveys. If you're listening, it's September. We released those early September. So check those out. We've got a lot of really cool stuff coming soon with Strength-Based Collective. And I just, for the first time in my school psychology career, have switched my schools. It sounds, I don't know, I had the same schools for 3 years. So I am navigating new schools. I'm navigating middle school now. So it's been an exciting school year. I needed to shake things up a little bit. So it's been cool kind of coming in with this strength-based perspective and kind of seeing who all is on board and kind of how we can work together to make that happen. So yeah, I'm just excited for the school year to get rolling and see what's next.
Awesome. The changing of the schools, I feel like lots of school sites could relate to that as both like an exciting and anxiety kind of provoking thing.
Yes, absolutely.
For sure. And I think at our I don't know when it was, if it was at the last book study, but I mentioned about, because you and I are geographically nearby, that, there was a parent in an IEP meeting that came in and was talking, and a lot of the language, I was like, this sounds so much like hacking deficit thinking. And come to find out, she's a teacher in PG County and had just seen like a training that you put on, Dr. Eden. No, so it was, I was like, I know her.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's so cool.
So very cool. You've both been very busy going around spreading the word. That's awesome.
I love that. And, I like what you said, Byron, or it's important, I guess I should say. I don't like that people are attacking SEL, but I like that, that you brought that up. I think it's really crucial for us to continue to protect students' needs, and regardless of political climate and some of the pushback. And we talked about this in a class that I teach at Southern Connecticut State University, an intro to school psych class last year, about the pushback against SEL and what were some creative ways that we can connect with parents who perhaps disagree or maybe are afraid of that term because they fear that their kids are going to be brainwashed, or and really the students were good and came up with ideas for just trying to connect with people and trying to listen, but then trying to remind people that we all need to learn empathy. We all need to learn to connect with one another. And that's what this, that's what SEL is about. It's not about brainwashing and making your kids political on my side of the aisle or something,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad that you're having that conversation with your students. And what I've really come to find is, even when you talk about empathy, there's this video. If you YouTube it, if you search for it, you know what I'm talking about, of this certain group who are speaking out against empathy, and they're equating empathy with indoctrination of our young people. And what we have to do is be able to take a stand. This is important, and be able to dispel misinformation. No, it is not that, but yes, it is this, and stand on that. And I think because it has been heavily politicized, the reality is there was a lot of fear that was created. There's fear of retaliation, there's fear of the unknown, there's fear of being ostracized. And where we are, I encourage people to speak in terms of, well, what does this mean for students? What are the outcomes? Who's going to benefit? And importantly, because there's been a lot of talk in terms of equity being linked to CRT. Well, how can we get to the root cause of inequity? And what that looks like is making sure that every student gets exactly what they need to be successful. And at the core of this is having these tough conversations, not shying away from it, being equipped with the right knowledge so that we're comfortable and ready to have these conversations and not back down, which is very difficult. And I understand if you're an intern, if you're a practicum student, if you're an early career practitioner, these are not easy conversations to have. And so I encourage, especially for those who might not be well established or who are relatively new to the field, we have to speak on these things in terms of outcomes and what it means for the young people that we work with. So I'm glad that you're having those conversations with your young people too.
Yeah, thank you. My hope is to prepare them for the things that they're going to face, and have them be strong and ready to to have those hard conversations. And so that's why we really appreciate the work that you all are doing, because you're leading the way. And and I think just for new school psychologists, especially for all of us, but for beginning to, for me, I'm old school, right? I've been doing this a long time. And for an old guy to, maybe change is a little harder for, than a younger person who we can just sort of bring up in a strength-based approach, and so I think just reinforcing this right from the get-go, the strength-based approach, rather than that deficit thinking, rather than every evaluation is to figure out what's wrong with a child, or we're referring the child because they're not measuring up, and and we have to sort of figure out how they fit the mold, I guess. And so really getting people to think like this from the start, the strengths-based approach is so crucial.
I feel like the deficit thinking is entrenched, and even after reading the book, I feel like I'm getting better at catching myself, but it's still, I'm like, for example, I have an intern this year, which I'm thrilled about, and she's awesome. And I'm kind of taking her around and showing her, my friends, my students, and we were looking at a couple different students on the spectrum, and I started to describe how different they all are, and then I find myself going into, this one is high cognitive functioning and this one not so much, like, and I'm just like, oh, like it's just so I need to, yeah, so I'm catching myself at times. I'm sure there's times that I'm not, but it's hard. And but thankful for the book, for at least I'm noticing that now, and I'm trying to do better.
Yeah. And,
Go ahead, Kelsey. Go ahead. You got it.
And then I know Byron has something good to say too, but I think we have to remind ourselves that the only descriptors we've ever been given as psychologists, as mental health professionals, are these deficit-based words. So it's very easy to just, especially when we're talking about disabilities. So, I think I want everyone, because I do it too. And I think it's a whole new, like, we are shaping the landscape as we speak anytime we talk about a disability. So I will say, with the Strength-Based Collective, we're actually working on something very similar to what you're talking about, which is affirming language when talking about disabilities, and ways to talk about them from a neurodiversity perspective. So I hope that that's something that can maybe help as we bridge into the disability space as well, in terms of being strength-based.
Yeah, that's good, Kelsey. Rachel, I was going to address the point that you made. I think everyone on the face of this planet is accustomed to deficit thinking. We've been conditioned to, especially as psychologists. Like, that's the way how we practice. And even if we looked at it from another angle, as a parent, like, that's how. And nobody taught me how to be a parent. I see what's around me. I pull from how I was raised, and it's deficit thinking. And so we have to bring it to our conscious awareness, like, okay, I might have been taught this way, I might have been conditioned to respond to this way, but I don't have to. At the core, that's what, at least my hope, I believe Kelsey's as well, has been, how can we give people a new lens through which to view the world around them, which is the strength basis, which is why I say, we have to shift from what's wrong to what's strong. But it takes practice, it takes work. We can't get down on us, we can't beat ourselves up. We have to, every single day. It's like going to the gym. I know I need to get in the gym. I fell off, y'all. I fell off. But we have to practice. We have to hit those weights. We have to put in those reps. We have to build it. And if we don't, we just won't have it. And how do you practice that? Well, we give tips in the book. As Kelsey has referenced, there's a lot of resources through the Strength-Based Collective, but man, it takes work. And I'm not gonna sit here and sell big dreams that it's an easy thing to do, because it's not. But it's possible if you commit yourself to it. I'm one of the co-writers of the book, and right before we hopped on this call, I have 3 kids. The 2 oldest are grade school level, and my oldest, he's academic, like, he's a thousand times smarter than me. He has straight A's, always getting straight A's. That's his thing. My daughter has to put in more work, and so I didn't even pull up her grades. She's like, hey, like, I'm in 3rd grade now. She's in 3rd grade now, which is hard for me to believe. It's always going to be my baby. But when you're in 3rd grade, you get grades. And so I pull her grades, and like, she had A's, mostly A's. She had like mostly B's. Then she had 1 C, which is amazing. But it was natural for me to do what? To gravitate to the C, and it was a 75. Instead of looking at all of the strengths, like, she had like a 95 in math, which I never would have got that. But like, she's crushing it overall. But it was natural for me to gravitate towards what's wrong. So we just have to constantly be aware of when it shows up, and then be intentional about making, hey, I am going to address it when it does show up, so that I just don't fall victim to it all the time. So
Yeah, that's a good example. And how many of us do that, right? We all do that at no matter, what level, or with our own kids or with our, family members, friends. So practice. And but it's great to, have this, the book, and, just chatting with you guys. And
I feel like having the verbiage, like I said,
yeah,
like having the replacement, anytime we would do like a behavioral intervention, like you're not just going to be like, don't do that thing. You're going to be like, don't do that thing. Instead, do this thing. And so, using that different verbiage and being ready for it. So when it comes, okay, I'm going to correct that instead of just, I don't know what to say, and to practice that over again. So
Yeah.
that's good.
And I'm excited about the resource Kelsey was referring to. I know we've done some presentations and we went through the language, and even as I was speaking, I caught myself because I've done so well saying that I am getting better in math, instead of saying like I'm trash in math, like I haven't been good at it. All those things are true, but even in this moment, I had to, and I thought about it, and I said, okay, where's some other language? One of the strategies that I often refer to is the power of yet. Um, Instead of saying I'm not good at math facts, I haven't mastered this math fact yet, which gives you a little bit of hope and optimism. So little strategies like that are always helpful.
And not only just because we want to reframe, but also because we have to remind ourselves the impact that words and language have not only on ourselves. So when we say things like that out loud, it impacts our own mental wellness. And then so you can imagine the impact when youth are around as well.
So true, youth, and then those that, like Eric's talking about, training and interns and things like that. Like we need to do better as supervisors and as professors, and in modeling this stuff and being aware, because I feel like you're going to copy what you see, and so it's important. There was one. Okay, so there was a quote in here that kind of, like, there's so many good nuggets in the book. I love the book, and as I'm reading it, sometimes I'm like would talk with Eric and Rebecca and be like, oh, listen to this, I love this type of thing.
That's awesome to hear, by the way. Like, I have a book, which is always like mind blowing for me to like hear that, and then like people read it.
No, I remember when the book first came out, Byron and I would like text each other like sentences from the book, like, that's what, like, we did that, like, this is so good. Like, we had those moments where like, this is crazy that this exists and we did this. Like, it's amazing.
No, I definitely, like, and it got me right away in like the first chapter when I was like immediately like talking to Eric, Rebecca, and I'm like, oh, but there was a couple things here, and one of the that were like a punch to the gut. Like when I read a quote that you included, that deficit thinking is a byproduct of white supremacy in schooling. I was like, oh, like it's true, and it's just like to hear it actually said out loud is powerful.
Shout out to my guy Sheldon Akins. He's a great guy. We had a conversation with him. It was like, Byron, man, like you all came in hot. Like we came in right away, getting straight to it. And one of the things that we thought was really important was, to give a definition of deficit thinking, but then talk about roots of it. It's easy to talk about symptoms of problems, but what we purpose to do was to start getting at some of the root causes of, where deficit thinking comes from, where problems in education, where they are, because it's always a lot of talk, is a lot of admiration of the problem, and nothing really changes. And so with this concept, because it is so new, we wanted to really get to the root cause in a very real way, and then talk from the lens of facts. And so in chapter 1, we share historical facts that happen. And Eric, back to the SEL conversation, I mean, how do you dispel when things have become so heavily politicized. You just got to stick with facts. And that's what we purpose to do. And it's facts to the extent where APA, the American Psychological Association, had to put out what was it, 2021, 2020? They had to put out a position statement applying for their role in racism. Well, why they do that? Well, we clearly laid those things out. And so, all of that to say, I mean, we had to bring these things to light so that people could really wrap their brains around. It's baked deep into how we go about business. And once we can understand that, now we can do something about it.
And I like where that brings you through the book, because Byron, you and I have talked about this at some of your talks at NASP, creating new structures, right? You lead into, how do we reframe this? How do we do something better? And your talk on how to be a disruptor, I think, was the first time I saw you speak.
Yes,
and
yes.
And I was blown away. And yeah, so we hear about this, we find the facts, we disrupt the systems that are unproductive or inappropriate or damaging, and we rebuild the structures more positively. So I love that you guys, you both, there's another term I'm learning to not use guys all the time when I'm referring to, everybody. That's a New York thing, I think, but working on it. So, but you all have, have really brought that through clearly in the book. And I really love how you lead to then, how do we reframe? How do we recreate? And there's a section in the book where we shift perfectionism to learning from mistakes, just like the not yet. And you have little phrases going from, the more damaging phrase or the more deficit thinking phrase to, a strength-based phrase. And I think just those little nuggets, as Rachel said, are so valuable, giving clear examples. How can we reframe this?
Yeah. And Eric, we wanted to give people clear, practical things they could start right away. And whenever we speak, whenever I'm talking to people, the best indicator of this is, it might be a day later, it might be a week later, but we'll get a message like, hey, I took that strategy you talked about, or I heard Kelsey share, and I did it. And here's the results. Blown away. And to me, that's how I know, like, we have something special here, something that's practical for people to do. That's to me one of the most important things. Kelsey, what you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think another thing that we really tried to do was strike a balance between the deeper piece, because you really do need to understand where this comes from and the bigger pieces. But then it's like, okay, now what? And I think that's where a lot of us get stuck. Like Byron mentioned earlier, admiring the problem. It's something that in grad school, I just really struggled with, because I felt like a lot of our research and discussions were admiring the problem. And so when we wrote this, we really wanted to go beyond that, right? So we know this is a problem, but here's why, and here's why we need to change. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm like feeling kind of emotional right now, like reflecting on the book. Like, this is just, we're coming up on that year mark of release. It released last October. So it's just crazy to be sitting in this conversation right now, kind of reflecting. So thank you for giving us this space to do that, actually.
Yeah, I know Rachel's already said it too, but we're so proud to, to call you friends and colleagues and have you here. So, as Rachel said, anytime, we're glad to have you all back on. So yeah, we appreciate just being able to reflect with you.
And I love just the format of the book, and how, the chapters kind of mirror and build upon each other, and the, how to implement things tomorrow, like littler things to do. And, I was like looking, so I'm looking on page 189 now. See questions over answers. I like the bullet points there because it's like I love me some bullet points and and whatnot. Talk less, smile more. I kind of giggled. I was like Hamilton quotes put in there. So yeah, it's just a great. So you both should be really proud of it. I think it's phenomenal, and
That's
I would,
awesome.
and I think the first time that we talked about it, I hadn't looked at it and read it, but I was excited. And then when you got me a copy, I was super excited. And then, yeah, it was just, it was great from there. So it exceeded all my expectations. So thank you.
Yeah. And just on a personal note, man, growing up in PG County, like where I'm from, and being an author is just, something that I think is a testament of this book. And so if you read through it and you still haven't bought in, understanding that as a product of, in PG County, historically, PG County is always second to last, only next to Baltimore City when you're talking about academic achievement. And coming from one of the schools that I think is rated 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10 on great high schools. You know, the expectations would not have been high for a kid where I come from to write a book. And it shows the power of when we see the potential of people, of what they can do, who they can become. It shows the power when you connect with resources, with support. Because Eric and Rachel, and to all of the listeners, what we're also saying is we can't ignore those very real things that our young people are experiencing in their real lives as well. But that doesn't have to define them, and it doesn't have to limit who they are or who they can become. And so if we can understand that context and understand the human potential and connect them with resources and supports, then a kid from PG County, Oakland, or from wherever can do whatever they dream and be successful at it. And I'm a testament of what happens when you can shift from what's wrong to what's strong.
I love that. And my wife's from PG County too, and born in DC and raised in PG County.
Love it.
And she's a doctor, professor, of psychology. So I love it, and that's it. You're absolutely right, So it's beautiful.
And what? Because I feel like we talked about this before. What part of PG County is she from?
She now her mom's in Upper Marlboro.
Upper Marlboro, yeah.
That's where my grandparents are.
Oh wow! I love Upper Marlboro. It's beautiful.
Me too.
Yeah, and she was raised in Camp Springs. It's now called something else.
Yep.
But yeah.
Nice. I did want to ask. I know we're talking a lot about, all of the positives of the book and all of the golden nuggets and things like that. But while you were reading it, not me switching the lens, you guys are the podcasters, apologies. But I'm wondering, is there anything that that really challenged you, or that you really struggled with, or you thought, that wouldn't work, or, I don't know. I think that's what I'm kind of seeking now. I'm looking for the pushback. I'm looking for where are the holes and kind of how can we fill those gaps if there's like gaps in knowledge. Not to put you on the spot, but
that is a tough one. Like I feel like I would need to look back, and because I was just in awe. I mean, and I don't mean to sound like I'm just, heaping praise and whatnot. To say that there's
I'll take it. Give me the praise.
I don't want to sound like I'm trying to, like, there's no financial, I have no conflict of interest, they're not paying me. I just really truly enjoyed the book, and I'm kind of a pessimist. And anytime anybody watches the podcast, I'm always the one's like, really, like I'm the skeptic. And so it was just refreshing. And so I don't think I can answer that question right now, because I would take some deeper dive and thoughts. I don't know, Eric, is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, it's such a good question, and I love just that um, thought to go beyond the surface. And I have to tell you, I typically jump into things with enthusiasm and like, yeah, let's jump into this. And something that I need to do more is actually read things with a more critical lens. So I'm happy to sort of look back through with a little more critical lens. I try to jump in and sort of pick out things that I think are practical, or things that I can use, or things that resonate with me. But I had the opportunity to be a reviewer for the best practices in school psych with Dr. Proctor, who's one of my favorites.
Yes.
And I have to say, the first couple, we got to read the other reviews. We had like a little group of 3 reading each chapter, and they would summarize the reviews for us. And by the second one, I said, "Oh my goodness, yeah, I need to read these with a much more critical lens." I'm sort of like kind of fluffy about some of this. Like, I like this, and some of the other folks were like, "Oh no, I'm not sure that works, and this needs to be, maybe could be rewritten a little better." And so I learned something in that process, that I need to read some things from time to time with a much more critical lens. So I will accept that challenge, Dr. Reed, and look a little more critically and see if there's anything. But just through the first read, and my book is full of sticky notes and bent pages and margin notes and things, and I've gotten a lot of nuggets from it. So a lot of things that I found valuable and helpful and practical.
Well, that's great for me to hear. I writing the book, I was a little hesitant. Have you all seen the meme? It's the little dog. I think it's a dog, but he's sitting in the chair, and the building is on fire. It's like everything is fine. And it really just captures like this concept of like toxic positivity and like the world is okay. And like, no, it's really not that way. I was worried that it would come across like we're just telling people everything will be fine when life is lifing. And I really wanted to be cognizant of that. And even when I speak with people, I want to make sure that people understand, especially for psychology, like we're all psychologists, like there are going to be times where we have to find someone eligible to receive special education services. Being strength based does not mean that we're getting rid of special education or that there's no such thing as disabilities. Like, we have a very real job to do. I talked about my daughter, who is doing well academically, like she's receiving speech services. And I would do her a disservice as a parent, as an educator, as a psychologist to ignore the very real needs that she has. And just more broadly, I think psychologists or anyone who is trying to be strength based, if you're ignoring real problems, you're not being strength based. You're not being the things that we're hoping that readers of our book will get to. But instead, what I hope was conveyed is this holistic approach. Like, yes, you could be a kid from PG County and you can be these things. Yes, you can be working on your math skills and you can be great. Like, so we wanted to bring this holistic approach to it, a balanced approach, because the problem is we've been too focused on what people can't do, on weaknesses, on challenges and struggles, and we haven't taking into consideration social capital and strengths and one carrying adult and all of these things. And the same holds true if we are only hyper focused on strengths and collaborations and connections and you can do it and being overly optimistic and ignore the very real challenges, then we can do the same thing just on 2 different ends of the spectrum. So we have to be holistic, and that's a key component of being strength based. And so that's, Kelsey, when you asked that question, that's one of the things that I thought of, and still really needing to stress that with any strength based work that we do from here on out. So
I'm wondering if, and not to put you all on the spot too here, but and not to, and sorry, at risk of being redundant of just saying how amazing the book is, but I would love to hear about some of the comments maybe that people have maybe come up to you during presentations or conferences, or some of the feedback that you got. Was there anybody that kind of stood out to you that was, I want to like live vicariously through you and the success of this book, and so I just love hearing about the positive impact and whatnot. So have people come up to you and shared things? Anything stand out to you?
Kelsey, you want to go first?
Yeah, I
talked a lot.
I can kind of quickly. I think if you guys know, I don't know, I don't know if we talked about this last time. Byron and I, our dynamic just works so well because I'm more introverted. I'm an internal processor. He's an external processor. So it just like the balance is great. So that's why I'm not talking as much. This is just how I am. But I think it's so interesting because I am also kind of a pessimist. So I think I've been waiting for like, and that's why I asked that question. I guess it's a negative question to ask, but I'm just waiting for like the critique and what can we do differently? What do people not agree with? What do we really need to hone in on, and the biggest thing is kind of Byron mentioned the whole piece of people viewing it as us ignoring weaknesses. So, just kind of reiterating that that's not the case. And then the only other challenge that I hear is kind of like what you mentioned earlier, Rachel, is like you get in a moment and you say something and you don't know how to respond, or like people are able to recognize it, but they're having a hard time implementing it because of what Byron said with it taking practice, taking a lot of time and effort and mental focus to really kind of make that happen. But otherwise, it's been really positive. People are loving it. People are craving it. They want the practical tools. The amount of requests I get like via email, via DM for like strength-based language to put in reports. I think that's why I'm really focusing on that piece, is really the practicality piece. Like people want to know, like, give me exactly what to do. That's kind of how we are in schools, which is tricky because you have to find a balance. Like a lot of this, there isn't a cookie cutter like method. There isn't just do this and all your problems will be solved. And I think that is what I'm trying to avoid, is people thinking that that is what this is. But great feedback. It really has been, especially among the school psychologists. I think that eye-opening moment of understanding that we don't have to solely focus on weaknesses. So one more piece I will say that I have struggled with when people ask me is in IEP meetings. I think there's a lot of pressure on the school psychologists to be we are like the deficit police. Like we're the people who come in and we talk about all the things that are wrong. And we are often looked at as the person who, names, do they qualify for services or not? And so it can get tricky if, that is our role. And they're like, well, why are you talking about all these positive things? Like, that's not the point right now. Or why are you talking about all that? You're minimizing the actual challenge. Like, it's like people think that we're ignoring what the actual challenge is. So it's kind of like we're all training each other to understand that this is how it should be. And this is what is in everyone's best interest, even if it hasn't been the way it's been done before. So in my meetings, that's what I do. I talk about strengths. And I think, yeah, that's my biggest thing, is kind of making sure people understand, like, I'm still doing my job. I'm gonna get to the part that you're waiting for. It's coming. But let me talk about this first. Like, let's make this just as important. So.
That's awesome. And yeah, no, I can totally see that, because sometimes I can see parents thinking that we're setting up to, your child does not qualify, right, and they think that, we need these service. And I've been in a meeting, I'm recalling some time ago, that, we were looking at several different eligibility categories, and I kind of was giving my opinion on each one. And so I started with, no, I don't think this is a fit. This is it. I was going to end with, but I think that this one over here is what kind of best describes what's going on. And the parent just got really upset very, earlier on in that conversation, because the thought was, you're going to tell me that my kid doesn't qualify, or that, so I think that to a point that parents kind of want want to figure out what's wrong. But yeah, so it's kind of a line that we walk, and I think it's important. And so, yeah, that's just a struggle. So I get that.
Yeah, learning that balance. We're all working on that balance together. So
something I've seen just recently, and I'm trying to incorporate more into my own report writing and conversations at IEP meetings, is referring to strengths and vulnerabilities. So these are the things that are impacting the child, whether it's a diagnosis or depression or something that they're experiencing. But framing it in that way, so that we can also focus on the strengths as well.
I love that, and I love vulnerabilities, because I think I've talked very openly about this in presentations. I don't use the word deficit in any of my reports unless I have to reference attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder. It's a different case, but I will not call any challenge that a child has a deficit. So it's simple things that we do that make an impact over time.
And Rachel, I was gonna answer your question. Can you phrase it one more time? I want to make sure I answer it correctly, so I don't go
Sorry,
off on a
I know
tangent.
I don't help because I ramble when I'm trying to get things out sometimes. But just if anybody's come up to you with that feedback, like what that was like, any stories that were shared, anything that just stands out to you.
Yeah, this has happened twice. Um, and I won't say where because I don't want to put anybody out, but they've come to me in tears and said that I was about to resign. And because your book or something I might have said during my talk connected to the book, like they've connected again, to what makes them on fire about this work. And so to me, that's a very surreal thing to hear, that some work that we put out into the world has inspired someone to keep going. Or if it's giving you the inspiration or motivation or encouragement to leave, like, hey, that's okay too. But in those two instances, that a body of work I contributed to impacted somebody's life in a way to where like they want to continue on with something that they care deeply about, it was a really cool moment.
Sorry, Eric, I see you wanted to chime in. I just know that if I were ever in a position of having this successful book and all this good stuff happening, does it make you anxious ever about like, what am I going to do next? How am I going to follow? You're both very young, and so like, I just does that negative thought ever creep in that you have to like keep up with this level?
Yeah, you're speaking my language. Yes. And I think Byron and I have talked a little bit about this too. It is kind of like, what's next? Like people kind of are looking to us as the leaders in this work. So it is pressure. Well, pressure that I know I put on myself personally. I don't want to speak for Byron. So just trying to kind of like take it day by day and not think that I have to like do everything, because that is kind of where I found myself caught in traps like that, where I'm like, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to, like, people are expecting this, but it's like, no, I'm going to keep following my passion, doing what I believe in, and the impact will follow if I stay true to that.
Yeah, I felt that for a while, for a number of different reasons. And I think for the work that I've committed myself to, like I have an obligation and a responsibility. Um, and so it's up to me to manage, whatever feelings that I might be going through. Um, to answer your question, like, yeah, absolutely. I think every disruptor, every great leader at some point has to have that feeling. If they don't, then I will be very apprehensive of that person because they might not perceive it as being a great responsibility. I'll speak for me. I view it as a responsibility that I do not take lightly. And where the feelings of anxiety might come from is having people's lives like in my hand, right? To where I just said in the example that I gave, like because of the body of work, like that person wanted to continue on in their job, in their role. Like that's a decision that is impacting somebody's life. And so, I view the work that I'm doing, that I'm heavily committed to impacting people's lives in a very real and meaningful way. And so with that comes a major obligation that, is heavy is the head that wears the crown. Like that's just the popped in my head as a great way to illustrate it. And I take it with a badge of courage and honor that I get to carry that. Another way to look at it, whether that's with carrying the mantle for strength-based work, whether it be for pushing themes of advancing our field in a holistic way, but even with the Black School Psychologist Network, I mean that's work that has never been done before. That's work that you know what we did in Atlanta with the Black School Psych Summit has never been done. And like creating history in a field to move the needle in a very real way, like that takes a lot. But I am so hyper focused on improving outcomes that whatever little anxiety that I have, like I use it to fuel me and to keep going. I acknowledge it, but I don't let it slow me down. And when the burden gets like really heavy, even with BSBN, like I found there's utility in having a great team, which you all know, like you all have the number one school psychology podcast in the world because you all have a great team. But with BSBN, like we have an amazing team to where now we're engaging in this work together. And when, I might not be feeling it or the next person might not be feeling it, like it's this collaborative effort that sustains the work to keep it going. So yeah, that's a lot, but that's just kind of where I am. So
That's fantastic. I have two questions. One for Kelsey, because I'd love to talk more about the strength-based collective and hear more about what you're doing. And then the other for both of you, tell us more about the Black School Psychologist Network and what perhaps what we all can do to support. I know probably, other colleagues who aren't Black school psychologists might say, oh, well, that's not for me. But how can we support? Or, I absolutely loved seeing the pictures and seeing the posts but also know that I don't need to be in every space, as well. And that's not, I want to respect that and support in any way that I can. So
everyone knows Peter. Peter was there in Atlanta,
yeah.
having a good time, eating our food.
I was quite jealous when I saw his pictures.
Shout out to Peter, man. Kelsey, I'll let you go first.
Thank you. Yeah. That's funny. I forgot Peter was there. Yeah. I think so. Yes, with the strength-based collective, had to get back on track. What was the question? I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. Just tell us more about what the strength-based collective is. And I know you've got some resources, and
Yes.
I've seen a couple school psychs already on some of the social media posts chiming in. So
Yes.
would love to hear about it.
Just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So yeah, basically, the Strength-Based Collective, we started it shortly after the book was released, kind of as a like next steps, like you have the foundation of deficit thinking, of strength-based practices. Now we're going to really get into it. We're going to get into the resources, the practical tips and tools. So some of the biggest things are we do briefs every month. So 1-page brief on various topics. The most recent one that was released just a couple days ago on September was our special education edition. So we have 4 briefs on, there's actually one of them on autism, strength-based practices in terms of autism. So I would definitely check that one out. We have the youth strength surveys. We have strength-based interview protocols. I know a lot of times when we're working with students for an evaluation, all of our interviews are focused on identifying the challenge, right? So these interviews are solely focused on talking about strengths, passions, interests with youth. And it's so fun to start the process with something like that. I've noticed a complete change in how I understand my students and how they feel about the process when I talk about those types of things with them instead of just the challenges they're having at school. So there's that. And we have just lots of other things coming in the works. I don't want to say too much, but some really, really big, cool things coming very soon. But all things strength-based, all things resources, all things practical tools and tips for educators and parents.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
for BSBN, yeah, we've been in existence for, it's hard to believe, a year, and we have done so much in just a short amount of time. And I just have to shout out Dr. Tierra Bland, Dr. Aileen Milford, Dr. Krista Edwards, and Carlita Joseph, who that's the BSBN team. We've expanded, we've added some additional members to our team as well to help us. Shout out to Kendall, who's helping with graduate students. We have Stacia, who's helping with just some volunteers, and she's helping Tierra, our chief of staff. And then we have her name's slipping me right now, but shout out to her. She's helping Aileen with our social media and marketing. But we've scaled up and added additional people to our team. Our top priorities for this year is to really see the difference. And what that means is to support, elevate, and advance the work of Black school psychologists. And we want people to see that, to feel it, to make it practical, to make it real. And the field of psychology, we have talked about recruitment and retention and, paving the way and like all of these things. And shout out to the legends who have done so much work. I always say I'm standing on the shoulders, and we have to keep doing so much more to even make a dent. And so BSPN is doing that work, and the hope is that it turbocharges the work that has been done. What we're doing again, we are and we just announced that we are having our second summit, which will be in Atlanta as well. We're super excited about that. Yeah, we're just doing so many really great things. You asked the question of how people can support, and I do want to make one thing clear, is that it cannot be the work of Black school psychologists to only support, elevate, and advance the work. Our field is, what is it, 87% white female, somewhere around there. Majority is not Black people. And so the reality is, like, we need everyone to help and to support. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through donating. With everything that happened in Denver, with all of that, one of the things that I said at the town hall is putting financial resources towards causes, so that these organizations and entities can support and sustain themselves. And so the Black School Site Network, we are a 501c3, which means we are a tax exempt entity, and we are able to receive donations. And so if people wanted to support, they can, support financially by donating on our website, BSBN Inc. And just find the donate tab in the upper right hand corner. They can donate. Another way is, supporting graduate students. We had a ton of graduate students at our summit who were able to engage in research efforts, which was amazing, by the way. And so sponsoring a graduate student to attend the summit is another awesome way. I joked about Peter, but Peter was there. He showed his support by coming, by saying, hey, is it okay if I share this space? And like we say that we created the summit so that we could have a safe space for us and to dive deeper into these conversations and themes. But if you want to come and learn with us, like you're more than welcome to that. So we would love to have the School Psych podcast come through Atlanta. That would be awesome, and to support. And you all have always supported me as well. So by default, like you all are already supporting the Black School Site Network. Rebecca, shout out to Rebecca with Thriving Students and Thrive Hive and all the work that she's doing. She was a sponsor as well, and she came through too. Of course, supporting the research efforts of folks like Dr. Proctor and Dr. Gamble and man, all these Dr. Graves, continuing to support those research efforts, to give props and kudos to those who have laid the foundation and have done so much work. I could go on and on and on about how to support this work, but I'll stop there.
I hope and I think that school psychologists as a whole realize that this helps everybody, this benefits everybody, this benefits our students, I think, more than anything, and just see this as a really good endeavor and a needed movement and support system and whatnot. So yeah, that's awesome. All right, I'm looking at the time. Eric, any last minute questions or anything, or anybody have any last comments? We want to be respectful of your time, but this has been an awesome conversation, and I think really, really fun to close out our little book study on with the two of you here. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I'm just grateful. I really appreciate the two of you, and I'm grateful that you wrote this book, and I look forward to reading and seeing and supporting, your continued work. So thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
And I just want to, I always thank y'all, Eric, Rachel, Rebecca, for always being welcoming, supportive of me. Was that Baltimore where like we were coming around the corner? I think, what was it, the award ceremony? And I saw y'all, I was like, there's the legends like walking by, and like, I was like, oh my goodness. So like that's every time I see you all, that's how I am stepping into your presence, just in awe of the work that you all have done, and just so blessed to be part of this conversation with you all. So thank you all for welcoming me and supporting the work that I've been able to do along the way. So I don't take it lightly.
Awesome. Well, we love you both, and we're just thankful to have you and that you're willing to come on and do this with us. So thank you again. Good night, everybody. I wish I had a date for the next podcast will be in 2 weeks, but we've been remiss in scheduling new guests. So we're not exactly sure what that topic will be, but we'll be posting that as soon as
we'll announce.
Getting into the
as we get close.
Good night, everybody.